everything you are doing with your magazine seems to run contrary to everything the rest of us think about magazines. It's evanescent. You produce it a couple times a year. You have a limited audience. You don't have anything to show us today. And yet you claim to have brought together all different kinds of media to create something completely new. So now you have the challenge of trying to help us understand how this all works and what it is exactly. Yeah, this is the best he could come up with.
I did bring something.
Yellow. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I was working as a magazine writer, doing mostly long, serious stories for the kinds of places that do that. And I fell into doing radio work, basically by accident. And it was really eye-opening. First, because it was this whole different set of tools, this whole different set of opportunities and constraints. And also, it was close enough to the world that I was in that I could end up doing it accidentally, but I realized I didn't actually know any of these radio people. And I knew millions of writers. And I started thinking about documentary filmmakers. I don't actually really know any of them either, except for one who's married to someone who writes for the Times. And I was thinking about the fact that we're in the middle of this golden age of multimedia, and unless you work in a big integrated newsroom, for the most part, these worlds are still really separate, professionally and socially. So one day I had this idle thought of what would happen if you made a magazine that was meant to be performed live. And it occurred to me you could do a couple things. One is that you could have pretty much anything you could present in a theater. So you'd have a screen, you'd have a sound system, you'd have somebody actually delivering a story to the audience. That would mean that you could have writers, you could have filmmakers, you could have radio producers, you could have photographers, you could have illustrators all in the room, and we could be making something together. The other thing that occurred to me was that if you had drinks afterwards, people would probably stick around, and then maybe we'd get to know each other. And it seemed more interesting than a happy hour. So that was the first idle thought. I called it Pop-Up Magazine, not actually named after what people think it's named after, but inspired by pop-up books. This idea of this flat thing that sort of springs up into three-dimensional life kind of magically. I wanted to make something that would feel that way. So we did it in a small theater. I put a couple kegs in the trunk of my car. It very quickly got out of hand. So that now we do it at the Symphony Hall in San Francisco, which has about 2,700 seats. We don't advertise anybody who's going to be in the show. We don't list it on event calendars. Tickets sell out in about 10 minutes. With each issue, we've pushed further, trying to find ways to integrate different kinds of media. In some cases, by putting them next to each other, a writer delivering a very lo-fi written piece under a spotlight, followed by a radio person delivering something in pure sound. In some cases, mashing all the media together in one piece, and having something that feels like all of the stuff you can do with nonfiction sort of stirred all together and made into a show and a party.
I want you to talk about one performance, one piece in particular, which you talked to me about on the phone, which was bringing together a world-famous photographer with a lifer in San Quentin, because I just thought that was a particularly good example of how from wildly different worlds you can put something
Sure.
amazing together.
So the structure of the night is basically you come in, you get a table of contents. The program is a table of contents. There's a front of the book, there's a feature well. The rhythm is meant to mimic a general interest magazine, only one that you read start to finish. And when we approach people asking them what they might want to do, we try and make a very open ask. So we're not asking them to do a story on a particular topic most of the time. We're generally saying, we don't want memoir, we don't want fiction. What would you do with a few minutes on stage with the ability to have sound and an image and somebody on stage if you want, and anything else I haven't thought of. So we asked Richard Misrak, the legendary photographer, this question. And he said, very quickly actually, he said, I'd like to do something with maybe my favorite piece of writing that I've seen about one of my photographs. He had just found it, so it was very fresh, and it meant a lot to him. It had come in the mail. It was a handwritten letter from San Quentin. And it was written in this very shaky handwriting because when you get a pen there, they take the plastic shell off and just give you the middle, because the plastic shell, it could be a weapon. So you get this very bendy, shaky pen. So it's written in handwriting like that. And so we thought about how can we convey this in a dark room full of people. And so he went out and began this story. And one of the things that we try and do is have people not know exactly what's going to come next. People can't immediately read that this is going to be a sound piece or this is going to be a photo piece. We'll oftentimes start one way and then veer. So he came out and we presented it as he was going to be telling a story. And then he puts an image of his photograph and then another photograph that the prisoner wrote about by Hiroshi Sugimoto. And then it switched to an image of the letter, of a few pages of the letter so you could see the handwriting. And then he stopped talking, and then you heard a voice in the theater. And we'd sent a photography teacher who works at the prison out with, I taught her how to use radio gear, and had her go and ask the inmate to read his letter aloud in tape. And so then what happened is he stepped back from the mic, and this room filled the audience. And he basically was talking about loneliness. And so the image was an image of a drive-in movie theater, a drive-in movie screen in the desert with nobody around. And for about 3 or 4 minutes, everybody just sat in silence and heard this voice in the echoey, strange, sonic environment of a prison talking about this life in there disconnected from all people and how he saw that in this image that was on the screen. And sometimes if you're not a big reader of art criticism, which I'm not, it can be very cerebral. It doesn't necessarily invite you in. And there was something about this that was really vivid and had a real emotional effect on people aside from the ideas of it. And actually part of that was hearing the voice and seeing the photographer on stage who was clearly moved by it, and seeing the image and having this all combined. And I would add that part of it is really, there is something magical about sitting in a dark room full of people. I think you receive things in a different way.
This is the kind of thing that makes me feel incredibly jealous that we can't do. But how do you, in the magazine industry, we talk about the pass-along rate, so the number of readers that you have who read the magazine and talk about it. So for instance, I went to a wedding in London last week, and I talked to a Scotsman who wanted to talk about one piece, and a French lawyer who wanted to talk about another piece, and a young man who works as a diplomat about another one. And it made me feel really good about the future of the New Yorker, which we do worry about quite a bit, and made me realize that people are out there all the time talking, and around the world now, thanks to the internet, about some of the pieces we're doing. Does it not matter to you that your audience is limited to one night, twice a year, even as your audience gets bigger and bigger?
Well, in the beginning, we thought about, should we record it, should we film it, or not? And this has been one of the things that we've tried to do over and over again, which is to not make decisions out of habit. One of the things that we felt is that a lot of things get recorded and streamed because it's easy. There isn't actually a thought about who is that audience watching the stream, and does this even make sense streamed? Is this going to be a good experience or not? Is this you can I've seen some really terrible live streams of things because it just wasn't meant for that medium. So we thought, well, what would it mean to not record it? And it occurred to us that people would be willing to make pieces. Everything is new the night of the show. People would be willing to report pieces or share pieces drawn from giant projects in progress that maybe they're not ready to share with the whole internet just yet. And that also a big part of what we wanted to do was take this idea of reported storytelling, which we love, and make it something that you go out and do after dinner. Make it something that I know of so many people who've told me they've gone on first dates to a show. Insert it into popular culture in that way. And so in a way, not recording it meant a few things. It actually, the contributors really liked it, that it was one thing that was different than the other things. it meant that we only had to worry about one audience, the audience in front of us, right there in the room. We didn't have to split our attention between two audiences, because if you're going to do a film thing, that's really what you have to do. You have to think about how is this going to work for both audiences. And it also reinforced the fact that, that there's, I think sometimes by making things available everywhere, you can sacrifice a sense of specialness. And there's real power in specialness. This idea that something isn't going to be around forever. That you actually have to make time. You have to go out and do this thing, and you have to come out and all be in the room together. And using the fact that the issue is going to expire as a reason for people to get excited about coming out is also part of the reason that we pack the theater, and it's part of the reason that people stick around for hours afterwards at the bars. So it's I would not want all or even most magazines to operate this way. In a way, it's a complement to everything else. It's sort of one thing with different rules.
And have you seen pieces mutate in unexpected ways afterward?
Absolutely. We're always really careful. If we're doing work in progress, we're really careful not to do something that, if somebody's writing a magazine story, for them to do the same story for us before it comes out. That's not something we would do. But sometimes people will be a year into a book that's going to take them 4 years, and they've been living by themselves with this thing for a long time, and they really like the idea of taking a bit of it out and sharing it with a live audience and have people clap and cheer like they're a rock star. And so in that sense, we see books come out, we see feature films come out where people have shared a little bit of it. Also, people have increasingly people will pitch us new ideas, and they'll sort of see how it goes. And if they get an amazing response to it, it'll live on. And so there have been lots of pieces that somebody's done a short version for us, and then there's been a long version later on in a magazine, or a long version on the radio, or a short adapted version. So yeah, things definitely have a life afterwards, and that's always fun. I think for the people in the audience too, because they feel a little bit like it's like visiting an open studio or something. They got to see something before the whole world saw it.